astounding victory for Starmer. 500 days in, another austerity budget on the cards. Today he is the most unpopular Prime Minister on record. This government has implemented attack after attack on the working class. Meanwhile, the richest in society have increased their wealth. Today in Britain, the richest 1% hold as much wealth as 70% of the population. And all of the anger that is growing in society poses the possibility of new waves of working class industrial struggles, but has also brought to the fore the question of building a political voice for the working class at the same time, including with the announcement of your party by MPs Jeremy Corbyn and Zara Sultana just a few months ago. But we know we don't need just any party. We need a mass workers' party led by the trade unions, with the mass of the working class involved taking a lead and building a political alternative. And that's a lot of what tonight's rally is going to be about tonight. First, there is a dispute raging on, a long and important dispute raging on in Birmingham against a rotten Labour Council. Socialist Party members have been building solidarity for the strike and will continue to support it. But first, it's my pleasure to announce that Matt Reid, the Unite convener for Birmingham Bins, is going to speak to you all.
Thank you very much. I'm from Birmingham, so I do apologise for any language barriers we have to cross today. We're here today at a time of real challenges for working people in this country. In Birmingham, the bin workers face an £8,000 pay cut. That's 20% of their annual wage. A loss like that will have drastic effects on their lives, from mortgage and rent payments to just buying food and clothes for their families in the worst cost of living crisis in a generation. This situation has been unbearably financial, emotional pressure to their striking workers and their families, and it is all due to the Labour Council that, instead of standing firmly with working people, has decided to use union-busting tactics and legislation like Section 14 public order notices and injunctions to worsen our pay terms and conditions using fire and rehire, and try to make industrial action and protest as ineffective as possible. All while being supported by a Labour government who have every opportunity told striking workers to end the strike and just accept the pay cuts. That is not what the Labour Party was created. It was actually created to stop employers from getting away with that kind of treatment for workers. When the Labour government came to power, we were excited because Gove had sent in commissioners into Birmingham, so we thought, a Labour government, thank God. Do you know what I mean? Things will change. When the Labour government came to power, they promised change. They promised an Employment Rights Act that would be game-changing for working people. But the reality is far from that. What was promised? The proposed amendments would still allow fire and rehire in the public sector and local authorities, meaning local authorities like Birmingham would be able to tear up contracts and fire rehire care workers, teaching assistants, refuse collectors, and many other job roles, and all they would have to do is show financial difficulty, which after years of austerity is not a difficult ask. Despite all of this disgraceful behaviour from a Labour Council and government, we're still standing strong 11 months into our industrial action. We have the full support of our union and Sharon Graham, our General Secretary, and we have the full support of our Regional Secretary, Anne-Marie Kilcline. We've also received messages of solidarity from all around the country and so many generous donations to our strike fund. Our movement has really shown us that we are not alone, and we all have the backing of organisers, activists, other sister trade unions and all working people who understand the massive sacrifices that striking bin workers in Birmingham are making to make a positive change for their own situation, and by extension, other public sector workers as well. We know that Birmingham is just the blueprint. With the laws that have been changed, every other council will be facing the same sort of situation. They'll see how it works in Birmingham and they'll push forward with their own say. We're struggling financially, we need to fire and rehire this workforce. We're at the historic moment where we are balloting our agency staff for the first time. This is the agency staff who were brought in to replace us in December. I used to call them scabs, but now I've changed my tune quite drastically because they're showing an amazing strength, and they've been treated so badly on 0-hour contracts. If they're late, they're sacked. If they don't complete their rounds, they're sacked. And basically a lot of them, we're balloting them, the reballot result is due Monday, but a lot of them have come out already, over 40 so far. Because Birmingham, as I said, is just the beginning. If we allow them to win, this will be the blueprint for every local authority in the country. So if Labour no longer stands with working people, we can no longer put our heads in the sand and ignore it. It is time to rebuild. We built a party based on workers' rights, equality, fairness and true solidarity before. There is no reason we can't do it again. A truly democratic socialist party that is based around making material change and bettering people's lives in this country. A party for the people, by the people, that focuses on what unites us, not what divides us. And together we can hold the right wings tied back and make a fair, inclusive society that we can all be proud of, with unions and normal working people at the core. Because when we're all together, we've seen it before, we can be absolutely unstoppable. Thank you.
On the Unison executive holding a black member's seat. She was re-elected earlier this year with 28,792 votes. Socialists like April play an important role struggling for fighting trade unions. Speaking in a personal capacity is Unison NEC member April Ashley.
Thank you, Helen, for that introduction. And I'm really proud to speak at this Socialist Party rally, but obviously speaking in a personal capacity Yes, so I'm a Unison rep on the National Executive Council, representing black members on that. And the rally today is how your party can be part of the working class and fighting for the working class, part of a working class political representation. But I'm talking about how your party can be part of the fight against racism. So we've seen the continued rise of racism this year, with attack on migrant workers' hotel, mosques, bombing of mosques, anti-immigration protests, the 100,000 strong Unite the Kingdom rally, and the threat of UKIP just recently marching in Whitechapel, really has brought real fear for black workers this year, following, if you remember, the far-right riots in last year, in 2024. And hate crimes against Muslim people have doubled. And now we have the threat of the Reform Party potentially in government at some point, and now holding 10 council and potentially gaining more councils in the local elections next year. That means for many black people, they think things are worsened for them. We have the Labour Party trying to reform with their new visa rules. Hundreds of black, Asian and migrant workers could be imminently deported in their new visa rules. And as I said, Labour Party is moving further and further to the right, scapegoating migrant workers for the collapse of living standards for workers in the UK. We've seen Labour, Starmer and his small boats rhetoric, and now recently the Home Secretary tightening the asylum rules, really bowing to the pressure of reform, whipping up racism as a cover for austerity. They're actually emboldening the far right. That's what they're doing by moving to the right. They're not combating them at all. And we know workers are furious about the cost of living disaster as living standards continue to fall, but with no end in sight. And Labour's hated for promising to end Tory austerity, that's what they came in on, but instead has continued attacking workers. We know about the attack on the pensions, winter fuel payments, disabled worker benefits. People are furious and they had to U-turn, but they're still continuing child poverty, the 2-child benefit cap. So, children are worse and worse, they're getting poorer and poorer. And so workers are tired and they're desperate because they're continually struggling on poverty pay, lack of housing, which is just a disaster for young people, high rents, brutal slashing of services, crisis in social care in the NHS, I could go on. And we can't afford to eat and to heat our homes at the same time. Energy bills are shocking. I just had an energy bill, I just couldn't believe it myself. And I'm not the poorest paid worker, people just can't afford to live. So workers are punishing Labour by voting for reform, who pretend to support ordinary workers. I think I read somewhere that Nigel Farage always is around with a beer glass in his hand to pretend he's a person, a working person, a working man, but of course it's not true. He's a millionaire and supported by the establishment. And even, we saw the Tommy Robinson demonstration, the millionaire buckers. We saw Elon Musk addressing that demonstration. He's the richest man on the planet. And again, blaming migrant workers instead of the rich, instead of himself. And he just had, isn't it, a £1 trillion pay rise? But he said it's migrant workers, that's the problem, that's the cause of problems in society, not the rich. And we saw a reform in UKIP recently trying to intimidate the local community in Whitechapel, but youth came out to defend their community because it's whose street is our streets. So the youth came out to defend the community. And we have seen thousands of people last year coming out to defend the community against the far right and against the fascists. And this community stand is necessary in uniting with the working class to make sure that we can combat them on the streets. So we stand for the unity of the working class against the far right and reform. But in order to stop the far right and reform, we must link the fight against racism to the fight against austerity. The trade unions must play the leading role in the fight against austerity and racism. As the trade unions, we know, can unite workers from all backgrounds to stand together, as we do in the workplace, when we fight against the bosses and employers for better pay and against cuts. On the picket line, we're uniting workers together, and that's what we must do. We can unite the workers with the slogan of jobs, homes and services, not racism. And the TUC passed this motion quite a few years ago, but what have they done since then? So we're saying the TUC must act on this motion, because for far too long, the trade unions were opted out of actually leading the fight against racism and really outsourcing it to other organisations. They have a very moral stance against racism, of course, and on immigration, but really not linking it to the fight against austerity, and that's what we must do. And your party could play a vital role, as not only they should not be combating far right and fascists on the streets and stop the marches in places like Whitechapel, but your party could unite trade unions, community groups, anti-racist organisations, young people to fight together against racism and austerity. I think I'll steal Dave's line from the picket line to the Parliament. That's what your party could play that role. So we need a political alternative to challenge Labour's austerity and the racist Reform Party and the far right, and that's what your party could potentially do. We must remember that Labour, under Jeremy Corbyn, when he had an anti-austerity programme, won over 1 million voters from UKIP in the 2017 election, and this is the role that your party could potentially play again. When asked on the doorstep, what workers are fighting for, and what's the most important things they're thinking about. They're talking about pay, housing, energy, austerity. Immigration comes way down on that list. So, that's what they're really angry about, and they're obviously blaming migrant workers for that, but it is actually austerity that they're concerned about. And I think it's important that we're linking that fight against austerity and to the fight against racism, but also to the fight against capitalism. So it's really important that your party, as I said, they're an anti-capitalist party and a socialist party, and need to be a mass workers' party. We know that capitalism fuels racism as it divides and rules workers. We know that. Racism is built into the foundations of capitalism. As Malcolm X said, you can't have capitalism without racism. So we need to fight capitalism and build a socialist society. And that is the only way to finally end racism. We have mass movements, the Black Lives Matter movements, we have equality legislation, we're always fighting against racism, but we still have it. So we need to fight against racism, against austerity, and against capitalism, but fight for a socialist society. As the crisis of capitalism worsens, and it is going to be worse, and deepen, as I said, there's no end in sight to austerity, then it's urgent that we have to change society. As we've said, it's going to be socialism or barbarism, so we have to change society. So, yeah.
Is a socialist students activist and a campaigner who played a really important role in building for the recent Trump walkouts by school and college students, and here to tell us all about it is Sophia Pandolfi.
Young people today have grown up in a world of crisis. We've seen governments increase university tuition fees, cut our youth services, attempt to strip away disability benefits for young people, and propose a future which gives us no hope. Many, not old enough to remember government prior to the 14 years of Tory rule, will have hoped against hope that their quality of life would improve under Labour. Its policies of austerity here and warmongering abroad have shown the opposite. Internationally, we've watched our government support the brutal genocide in Palestine, claiming it has no money to invest in our education and services, while still investing in politics of war. Living under a system devoid of opportunities and dependent on international exploitation has fueled anger and frustration amongst young people. But if we young people are to have a real future to look forward to, we need to transform our anger into action. By getting organized for a socialist alternative to capitalism and the war, exploitation, and oppression that this system produces. That is what socialist students did when Donald Trump, an embodiment of capitalism in crisis, came to visit the UK on the invitation of Keir Starmer in September. Socialist students organized a campaign of youth walkouts against Trump to get young people organized against Trump and Starmer's politics of war and division. To build for the walkouts in London, I helped to give out hundreds of leaflets, put up posters, and meet with students to share ideas on how to protest against Trump's visit. Across the country, we had hundreds of students walk out, standing up to Trump and the brutal system he represents. This walkout from schools, colleges, and universities on the 17th of September happened on the same day that Trump was in Windsor Castle, feasting on a state banquet with Starmer, the King, and a guest list of billionaire tech CEOs. Our walkouts forced their way into the national media. The government had been doing their best to keep Trump's visit under wraps, knowing the anger it would provoke. But our campaign got onto the ITV and BBC, into the Independent newspaper, and even into the American Time magazine, which has twice named Trump Man of the Year. It wasn't easy. At one school in South London, we watched the head teacher rip leaflets out of students' hands. At another school in East London, the management called the police to intimidate students into not protesting. But really, missing a day of school to fight for our futures is much less disruptive to our education than the current cuts and underfunding of education that we're experiencing. The youth walkouts against Trump were a chance to show that young people can fight back when we get organized. Socialist Students is now following up the walkouts with a campaign to get students in schools, sixth forms, and colleges building our own student unions as a way for young people to have an organized voice, not just for one day, but always. By getting organized as students, we can more effectively link up with the workers who keep our education and society running, and build a united movement for the socialist change that we all need. For that, young people also need a political voice, through which we can fight alongside the organized working class. Your party is an opportunity to do that. During Corbyn's leadership of the Labour Party, we saw the impact of an anti-austerity, anti-war program in lifting the confidence of young people to fight for a future. Your party could similarly give voice to young people's anger by demanding fully funded, free education, mass building of council houses, and rent controls, all as part of a socialist program to transform the lives of working class and young people. Why not take that first step by having Zara Sultana, Jeremy Corbyn, and other Your Party MPs in the Independent Alliance proposing an amendment to the upcoming budget? Instead of Labour's plans for more tuition fee rises, why not call for the total abolition of fees, as well as the cancellation of student debt and the immediate reintroduction of maintenance grants for all students. Socialist Students members have joined your party and are fighting for socialism and working class struggle to be at the heart of it. In universities across the country, we've organized dozens of meetings on how your party can be a democratic voice for students. As a next step to building the party we need on campus, we'll be inviting Zara Sultana, Jeremy Corbyn, and other Independent Alliance Your Party MPs to be a part of the Your Party speaking tour of universities and colleges. If you want to help build a political voice which can help unite students and young people with the powerful struggles of the working class, then join Socialist Students at your school, college, or university to help build the fight back. Thank you.
The fight for a political voice for the working class is not limited to the UK. So our next speaker is going to fill us in on events across the Channel in France. She is the Gauche Revolutionaire's General Secretary and a France Insoumise councillor. Leila Nasaudi sadly couldn't make it here today in person, but has sent us this video.
I am the General Secretary of the Gauche Revolutionnaire, the French section of the Committee for Workers International in France, and the sister organization of the Socialist Party in Britain. Times are rough in France. Macron has been the president of the rich and the capitalists for more than 8 years now. Layoffs are on the rise, wages are stagnating, rents and skyrocketing. Public services are being destroyed by Macron and the capitalists. Meanwhile, big business profits are breaking records as in a lot of countries. And for 8 years now, there is a capitalist offensive against the gains that workers and youth have won through their struggles in France. La France Insoumise has been the only national political force with 40,000 members now. It is the only one that is active in politics, resisting Macron and Le Pen and attracting new layers, especially young people. In the parliament, LFI is leading the battle against Macron's government, but also against the successive betrayals of French Parti Socialist, of Hollande Parti Socialist. For 8 years, our organization, the Gauche Revolutionnaire, as a Marxist organization, has been participating in the construction of La France Insoumise. It's the only political force of any size that campaigns and defends the general interest of the majority of the population against the capitalists and refuses to govern in the interest of the capitalists. In this respect, it differs from the French Parti Socialist, Socialist, which has long since become a bourgeois party, but also from the Communist Party, which agrees to run local council with the PS and allows anti-workers policies to pass. While building our revolutionary party, we seek to strengthen the organization of young people and workers on a class basis, wherever possible, and to advance a socialist program where young people and workers are organizing and trying to resist, in the trade unions, but also in La France Insoumise. LFI is behind most of the mobilization, as was the case with the demonstration against Netanyahu and the genocide on the Palestinians. La France Insoumise and its activists are the only one on the left to mobilize against division and racism in the face of the rise of Le Pen and Bardella and the Rassemblement National. But France Insoumise itself limits this potential. La France Insoumise weakens its potential due to its weak structure and its program. First of all, it's not a party, it's a movement. You don't join it, you click to join. And in fact, outside the turbulent and political periods or outside elections, local activity can be very limited in some regions. The possibility of organizing, making collective decisions together, and producing local materials is therefore also very limited. The other major problem with this mode of organization is that La France Insoumise does not claim to be a working class organization. It prefers to talk about the people and not the working class, and in its program, it's very weak how we can overthrow capitalism, which makes it confusing. And LFI does not seek to have an organized presence in the working class or in the trade unions, even though the Communist Party acts with its leadership as a political brake to prevent the CGT, the main trade union, for being too aggressive against the government policy. Yet, LFI could play a decisive role, as it did on the 10th of September, when it called for mobilization alongside the Bloc Everything movement and alongside also militant trade unionists. The militant nature of the 10th of September was decisive in forcing the then Prime Minister Bayrou to resign even before the day of the strike. So in a way, LFI is already playing the role of a new party. But as Gauche Revolutionnaire, we think it should call for the creation of such a political tool. A tool for workers, for you, a workers' party for socialism, the party of those who have only their work to live on. And that's the discussion we are continuing in France Insoumise, around France Insoumise, and of course around trade unionist activists who want to fight back Macron and who want to overthrow capitalism. Thank you.
Years ago, the Bakers Food and Allied Workers Union voted to disaffiliate from the Labour Party, ending their 119 years membership of Labour. They did this in the aftermath of Ian's expulsion, but the fight by the Bakers Food and Allied Workers Union for a political voice for their members didn't end with disaffiliation, and here is their president, Ian Hodson.
Comrades, sisters and brothers, bring your fraternal greetings from the Bakers Union. I hope you have a wonderful conference. Just to clarify, we disaffiliated before I got expelled. We disaffiliated because we knew this Labour Party wasn't going to represent the interests of our members or our class. That's the reason why we disaffiliated. And let's also be very, very clear. I mean, not too long ago, we was hearing how wonderful Angela Rayner was when she was having to leave the Labour Party due to being found out that she'd done something dodgy with a house down in Brighton. Let's be clear. I mean, obviously, I heard at the beginning of this conference, we got told, didn't we, when she was being pushed out of her position as the deputy leader, about this levelling up of workers' rights. Tell that to the workers in Birmingham who are facing fire and rehire and cuts of £8,000 in their wages. Tell that to the 0 hours contract worker that's been promised that they will have a contract to end their job insecurity so they can plan their lives, but still are on a job insecure contract and an expansion of 0 hours. Tell that to people who were told in 2019 by Keir Starmer about the uplift that he believed that people at McDonald's were entitled to when he stood on our picket line at McDonald's and said he supported the right for workers to be on £15 an hour. Where is that? Where is that support for workers on £15 an hour? And why is it? Why is it the phlebotomists in Gloucester that are now taking part in the longest strike in the NHS are still only just above the minimum wage? This is not the government that Labour said it was going to be. And that's why it's been really, really important that we as the left recognise we have to build an alternative. We got promised, didn't we? I mean, like you, I was probably unbelievably enthusiastic, thinking here we are, the left, July, so it was announced we're going to have a new party to represent us and our interests, and it's going to fight for our class. It's not going to represent the billionaires or the trillionaires. It's going to represent us. And like the left, you know, if we can fall out, why not? But I've got to say this, because I want to make it very, very clear. We were promised a party that would belong to us. They called it your party. So why is it I keep reading about these factions who have now taken control of your party, they're going to hand down to us how we will organise, how the party will look, what the documents are that we can take part in discussing, and how the votes are going to take place. I didn't join up and leave again, so they could tell me how I would organise. I joined up because they told me this would be a grassroots party, represented for us, by us, and organised by us. We have been let down, and we must make it very, very clear. We are not going to create a Labour Party Mark II. So if they think, I've been there, you know, I know Dave's been there too. Obviously he served it as well. You know, the reality is, you know, MPs being in charge does not bode well for working class people. And that's why I do agree we need a workers' mass party that represents our class, organised by us, representing us, and making demands of people that want to represent our interests that say, if you want to go to Parliament, you are accountable to us as a class. And the party will be reflective of us as people. We ain't going to accept top-down authoritarianism or a general secretary that's appointed or a leader that's rubber-stamped. We, our class, will determine the future of our party. And we, as a movement, must make that demand at every meeting we attend. Also, as a class, we also must recognise that the trade union movement is on the precipice. if it keeps attaching its horse and cart to the Labour Party that fails us, that lets us down, then the trade union movement will go down with it. And we can't allow that to happen. The latest attacks on our right to protest should be told by all those affiliated unions that if you go through with it, then we will disaffiliate. We don't allow politicians to take away our right to protest or our right to strike. And we need to make that very, very clear. Because you're trade unionists, right? In your unions, you need to tell them, either tell that party that you will not give them any more money and we will walk away if they enact that anti-protest bill, or you no longer can represent us and our class. It's so important, and I realise you're now worried, where am I going with this? And I understand that, because it's never been more important. It's never been more important to unite the working class, because we face the biggest threat in our history, the rise of the far right, and the trade union movement needs to lead that fight. And if it fails to stand up, if it allows the Labour Party to lead us, then we will lose that fight, and we can't afford to. So stand up for our class, fight for solidarity, and fight to make sure the trade unions are on the right side of history. Solidarity.
The next speaker was mentioned in the last speech and was elected as a Labour MP, but in July she left and is now an independent MP and has helped to co-found your party. Sadly, she hasn't been able to make it here in person, but Zara Sultana MP has sent us this video message.
Thank you so much for the invitation to speak at your conference. I'm sorry I can't be there in person. I'm addressing the Pitman's Parliament in Durham with the Durham Miners Association, so I'm there with you in spirit. Let's get right into it. The choice before us is very simple. It's socialism or barbarism, and we must choose socialism every single time. That's what I want your party to be unapologetic about and what we must deliver for the country. Socialism. We have no other choice, with fascism growling at the door and Nigel Farage ready to have the keys to number 10. The stakes simply couldn't be higher. But this can't be a Labour 2.0. It genuinely has to be a socialist party led by members that is democratic to its core. And that's what I've been fighting for, maximum member democracy. We've all seen what happens when parties stop belonging to their members, when it's members who do the work, knock on doors, deliver leaflets, raise the money, but are shut out when decisions are to be made. That's not democracy, it's not socialism, and it's not what we're building. We're building something very different. A democratic, member-led socialist party with foundations so strong they would last a generation and beyond. Because it's your party, it literally has to belong to you. Our starting point, the first principle of everything that we're fighting for, is that our conference must be the supreme sovereign democratic body of the party. That's what I mean by the people's whip. Conference decisions that are binding on all elected representatives. If members vote for a policy, MPs and councillors must carry it out. If conference makes a decision, it is not advisory, it is binding. That's the only way to stop what's happened in the past, where MPs have treated members like volunteers, not equals. And future conferences must have delegates elected by all member meetings. That's how we guarantee a truly democratic party. Next, our leadership must be accountable to members, not insulated from them. That's why executive council positions must be ordinary positions, open to every member to contest, none reserved for MPs and councillors. We must hold these elections for the Executive Committee by the end of this year so that the leadership is democratic, not appointed. We know that democracy delayed is democracy denied. If this project is to succeed, it has to be a home for the entire socialist movement. It's our job to unite the left. That's why I'm supporting calls for dual membership, for lowering the membership age to 14, and for allowing people living abroad to join as international members. And our membership must be open to everyone living in the UK, not just those with the right to vote. Because socialism means solidarity with our entire class, including our migrant communities. If you live here, if you work here, if you struggle here, then this party is yours. That's what solidarity with migrants means. Now, young members aren't the future, they're the present. That's why we need a formal youth section with real power and representation. Not tokenistic youth reps, not symbolic committees, but a proper structure that gives young socialists a voice in how this party is run. The energy, the creativity and courage of young people should be at the heart of everything that we do. And party democracy doesn't stop at borders. In Scotland, members must have the right to found their own Scottish party, to decide its structure, to define its relationship with your party UK. The same goes for Wales. Members in Wales must have the right to establish a Welsh party to shape its form and its connection to the wider movement. Because socialism is about self-determination, and if that means independence, then that means independence. We will build unity through solidarity, not control from the centre. And we've all seen what happens when candidate selections are rigged in backroom deals, when seats become personal fiefdoms, and when the membership is told to accept whoever they're given. Never again. Only members decide who represents them. That means open selection, mandatory reselection, and the right to recall. No coronations, no Labour 2.0. Every representative must be accountable continuously to their members. And if you can't win the confidence of your members, you shouldn't represent them. For real democracy to work, it also has to be resourced. So local branches must receive 50% of membership subs and full access to membership data so they can actually organise in their local communities. That's how you build a living, breathing branch that can campaign, that can support strikes, support tenants' unions, and build real social power in our communities. And wherever there's a site of struggle in our communities, our members and elected representatives have to be there. Because branches shouldn't be seen as call centres for elections. If we get this right, they should be the centres of working class organisation. And again, members must decide everything about how this party is structured. That includes the leadership model. So should we have a sole leader? Should it be co-leaders or a collective leadership? Well, that's not for me to decide. It's for conference to decide. Not MPs, not a steering group, and not bureaucrats operating in the shadows. And if we trust our members on policy, we should trust them on structure too. To make sure that every voice counts, all eternal elections should be conducted using STV under the Droop quota, the most democratic voting system available. STV allows for pluralism and encourages cooperation. And if we want to build a genuinely broad socialist party, this is how we make it work in practice. But democracy means nothing without transparency. So we must have independent oversight of the sortition process for this conference and all future internal party elections. We need a full audit of party finances, and we must have a general secretary and treasurer elected by one member, one vote. No secrets, no just trust us, we've been doing this for a really long time kind of politics. Trust is built through openness and transparency. It's not a given. Finally, all amendments from regional assemblies must be published and accessible. Any amendment that wins 25% of support across assemblies must be put to a vote on conference floor, because every member deserves to know that their work, their ideas and their time actually matter. And my motivation has always been very simple: to strengthen our collective power, to put members in control, and to build the radically democratic socialist party that this country urgently needs. And I will continue to fight for grassroots power, because without it, we are nothing more than just another hollow political machine, just like the rest of them out there. We cannot build socialism without democracy, and decisions must be made by those who do the work, where MPs and councillors are electable to our members, where they don't vote for cuts but fight them, where branches have power, young people lead, where socialists of every background have a home. If we get this right, if we build a party that truly belongs to its members, we will create something that can't be bought, captured, or destroyed. And with 50,000 members, your party is already the largest socialist party since the 1940s. But we have the task of making it the most democratic socialist party in modern British history. So let's get to work. It's socialism or barbarism, and we know which one we choose. Thank you, and I wish you all the best for your conference.
Was the Labour MP for Coventry South East between 1983 and 1992, and then a Socialist councillor in the city too. He was always a supporter of Militant and is today a well-known member of the Socialist Party. He was famously the MP who gave away half his pay, and in the workers' movement is known as a principled socialist and working class fighter. Our next speaker is Dave Nellis.
Thanks so much, Helen. Matt, Ian, Sophia, Layla, Zara and April have all spoken eloquently about the need to fight back against austerity and war. The Socialist Party and its members have been integral to all those fights, but we've also consistently and constantly explained that without a political party under its control, the working class is fighting with one hand tied behind our backs. So we welcomed the launch of your party, as did the 800,000 initially enthusiastic in signing up, and we're working as hard as we can to make it an independent socialist voice for the organised working class. A consistent position. You might say we've got form. This is the 20th anniversary of our launch of the campaign for a new Workers' Party, which grew out of the widespread dissatisfaction with Labour under my former roommate Tony Blair from its accelerating privatisation of council housing, cuts and PFI in the NHS, and the brutal occupation of Iraq. We worked with Bob Crow in January 2010 and jointly launched Tusk. Tusk was not intended to be that mass working class party, but to show how, even with limited resources, a socialist alternative could be put before working people at election times, and it has a proud record in doing that, as the history on the Tusk website shows. This year, we launched a new initiative after the May elections, when Reform UK won 677 council seats, 41% of all the seats contested in England. It was called Time for Trade Unions to Take the Lead in Forming a New Working Class Party. And we invited the then 1,500 signatories to that campaign to a national Zoom meeting in July. Over 1,000 union reps and activists attended, and nearly 13,000 have now viewed the meeting on YouTube. Jeremy, Zara and Ian were among the speakers. Since then, we've organised follow-up meetings of activists in 11 different unions to discuss how to take preparatory steps to develop a political alternative. And that's getting an echo. That work must go on, but it's not an overnight job. At the beginning of the 20th century, when the Labour Party was formed, it brought together the three main left organisations of the day: the Independent Labour Party of Keir Hardie, the Social Democratic Federation of Tom Mann and Will Thorne, the militant leaders of New Unionism, and the more moderate Fabians. There was a minority of trade unions represented. Their involvement grew over the next 3 or 4 years. It took 9 years for the Miners' Federation, then the largest trade union organisation, to affiliate. It needn't take that long this time. Today's largest union, Unite, is already reviewing its relationship with Labour following an initiative taken by this party. The building of that first attempt at a mass workers' party at the beginning of the 20th century took the consistent work of socialist activists in the trade unions and the impact of events, not least the Taft Vale judgment, which allowed employers to sue unions for lost profits caused by strikes. Events are not under our control, but here, this weekend, we have the socialist activists who are most consistently raising in the trade union movement the need for an independent and socialist voice for the organised working class. That's the unique contribution the Socialist Party is making. The founding documents of your party talk of a comprehensive consultation exercise for prospective party affiliates, including trade unions, over the next 12 months. So there's still the potential for a democratic socialist party with trade unions at its core to be the outcome of the next 12 months. Now, why do we emphasise the need for trade unions at the heart of the new party? All those here know, in a union, it's not your union card alone that equals up the relationship between the employer and the employed. It's that the employer knows if she or he doesn't deal fairly with workers, workers can all act together to change the employer's mind. They can take industrial action, like the bin workers in Birmingham, the phlebotomists in Gloucester, the viola strikers in Sheffield, or the registered doctors. Politics is the same. It's not the individual views that we hold that give us strength. It's the political organisation of our numbers. The working class is 90% of the population. Not all of them are in work. Many can't work because of age or infirmity or caring responsibilities, but they're all part of the 90% majority of the population, that class which doesn't own the means to make a profit. It has to sell its labour power to get a wage. And 6.5 million who are in work are organised in trade unions. And we need to put them, their resources, their members, their structures, their power at the heart of this new party. The rise of reform is not a coincidence or an accidental shift in the moral output of millions of people. It's politics catching up with economics. A 50-year decline in the share of wealth workers create in this country actually going to them, and the social consequences of that shift. In the mid-1970s, 2/3 of the wealth this country made, the GDP, went to working class wages. Today, it's barely half. A loss now of probably £400 billion a year, which goes to wealth and not to wages. That was a result of a deliberate programme of attacks to reverse the gains the working class had made in the post-war period, started by Mrs Thatcher, exporting factories, privatising key industries, cutting public spending, attacking the unions through ever-tightening legislation. More recently, following the financial crash of 2008, the government borrowing and printing £400 billion to save the banks and their shareholders, and then imposing austerity to force ordinary working people to pay that money back. The TUC has estimated that without that austerity holding back wages, each worker today would be on average over £10,000 a year better off. After 15 years of austerity, wages are 25% less than they would have been, whilst over the same 15 years, the 350 richest families in this country, tracked by the Sunday Times every year, are 140% more wealthy than they were in 2008. Is it any wonder that millions of working people have lost faith in the politics and parties of the capitalist establishment responsible? And without a challenge, Farage and Reform UK are becoming the main electoral beneficiaries. Now, we know the reform bubble can be burst. In 2015, Farage's UKIP got 4 million votes at the general election. 2 years later, in 2017, when Jeremy was leader and Labour was seen to have his radical socialist policies that would materially improve the lives of ordinary working class people, Farage's vote fell to 600,000. And 1 million 2015 UKIP voters voted Labour in 2017 instead. We can do that again, but time isn't on our side. Next May's elections are a crucial stage in the fight to win mass support for a socialist alternative. 6 months ago, Reform won that 41% of council seats contested. Next year, twice as many seats in England, as well as elections to the Welsh Synod and the Scottish Parliament. Unchallenged, Reform UK could increase its councillors to 2,000 in 6 months' time, giving Farage's right-wing views a much wider platform than even he has at the moment. So your party should prioritise and plan urgently for the local elections next year, and bring your party members, anti-cuts campaigners, trade unions together locally to discuss a people's budget from which we can draw local manifestos. The red line should be all your party candidates must be pledged, if elected, to vote against cuts and fight to show there is an alternative to continued austerity. To start that process, we could look at the local council proposals in Jeremy Corbyn's 2017 and 2019 manifestos, which Tusk has collated into a document on our website, and you should circulate that to your party groups. Your party could win councillors in some areas, the balance of control, even control of councils, but the work for that has to begin straight after the conference in 2 weeks' time. To finish, we live in the 6th richest country on the planet. Yet here, as in every town and city, there are people sleeping in shop doorways. House prices are 8 to 10 times the wage of a 20-year-old, pushing home ownership out of reach. Rents are uncapped. Landlords profit. Getting a degree costs up to £100,000 in debt. Libraries are unfunded. NHS is overstretched. The streets are dirty. Parks are unkempt. There's hardly any youth clubs. And not one of those things is the fault of a few thousand desperate people coming here across the channel in rubber diggies. This unequal society, worsening for the majority of the population, is the fault of the way society is organised. Don't let anybody tell you it's always been that way. You'll never change it. Capitalism isn't eternal. It had a birth around 1750, and it can have an end. It's not a forever system. Capitalism is only 4 times as old as me. I say to the younger comrades here today, your generation can build something better. Join the Marxist wing of your party to make your party the best it can be. But also join the Socialist Party to build a society where the wealth created by workers in this country is not just 50% or 65%, but 100% devoted to the well-being of them and their families. Thanks for listening.
Huge possibilities are posed for the working class, as we have just heard. There are battles raging in the workplaces, our trade unions, protests and movements by students and young people, and the ongoing fight in our trade unions for a mass working class political voice. So many exciting opportunities, but without organisation and a clear socialist programme, opportunities can be lost. That is also why we want to take time this evening to mark the passing of Peter Taaffe, who died in April this year. Peter was a mammoth of our movement, who up until 2020 was the General Secretary of the Socialist Party. He also played a leading role helping to cohere the forces which now make up the CWI, the Committee for Workers International, to which we are affiliated, and fight for socialist ideas, not just here, but on every continent around the world. Peter came from a working class family in Birkenhead, but once he found socialist and Marxist ideas, he dedicated his life to fight for those ideas and an organisation the working class would require to fight to change society. The result of Peter's tireless work alongside others means today the Socialist Party is a growing fighting organisation with a clear theoretical understanding and unmatched confidence in the working class's ability to change society, as well as being actively involved in those struggles and strikes up and down the country. This year, our movement lost an important figure in Peter. He was a great writer, orator and Marxist fighter, and left an important legacy, which is reflected in the discussions taking place here, but also the many books and articles that he wrote, including for the first time available as a collection of work at Peter's writings on famous revolutionaries. We would like to mark Peter's contribution to the movement, as is increasingly commonly the tradition of our movement, with a round of applause. Tonight, and that amazing financial appeal, which we'll be announcing the results of at tomorrow's closing rally, I think you can only conclude one thing. There are important working class battles on the horizon, and the Socialist Party, along with every single one of our members, is preparing to play an important role in the struggles going forward, in the fight for a clear socialist programme and an alternative to the rotten capitalist system. That's why our final speaker is Hannah Sell, General Secretary of the Socialist Party.
Comrades, none of you are sitting in this rally tonight because you think capitalism works. As Zara Sultana said effectively on Question Time this week, Britain's 50 richest people have as much wealth as the poorest 70% of the population. 7 million households are regularly going without essentials because they can't afford them. Globally, global warming is accelerating. World leaders have backed the Israeli state while it committed mass murder and razed Gaza to the ground. We have the bigot-in-chief Trump in the White House and the baby bigot Farage ahead in the opinion polls in Britain. Karl Marx said that capitalism came into existence dripping from head to foot with blood and dirt. It has always been a system based on brutal exploitation of the majority for the profits of a few. But once upon a time, its brutality at least took society forward. Fundamentally, it developed the productivity of human labour. No more. Britain's productivity growth has been only 0.4% a year since 2010. That is less than a quarter of the average for the 30 years before that. One of the many reasons that Reeves is going to give as a justification for inflicting pain on us in the budget is that the OBR has downgraded its productivity predictions to only 1% a year for the next decade. But actually, for British capitalism, that is wildly optimistic. Even if the economy carries on as it is, and it won't. Capitalism has never recovered from the 2008 financial crisis. The bankers didn't suffer, not one of them was sent to jail, but our living standards have never recovered, And it is very clear now that the overvaluation, the bubbles in the global finance markets are so gargantuan that the capitalist class are terrified. But it is because it is clear that another crash is looming. That would destroy this Labour government, which, as we can all see, is already ripping itself apart. We have to remember, in all the press nonsense, the crisis of the establishment parties, the fact that the combined support of the Tories and Labour only adds up to a third of the electorate. That is unprecedented, but it is not caused by Starmer's wooden personality or their lack of media skills. It is because they act in the interests of British capitalism, and it is inevitable that as a result they become hated by the majority. The social base of the establishment parties has shattered. The so-called centre is collapsing, and as a result we have enormous electoral instability. That reflects the ailing, decrepit character of modern capitalism. And we are here to discuss how it can be put out of its misery and a new, democratic, socialist world can be built. Some people say that is utopian. We are told we have to settle for trying to make this horrific system a tiny bit better via charity work and all the rest of it. And look, we sympathise with, we think it's laudable, the desire to help. But every single socialist in Britain, every single socialist on the planet could spend their time helping in food banks, and it would not put the smallest dent in the poverty created by capitalism. But there is a force that has the power to change the world, to end poverty, to end hunger. And that, as we've discussed tonight, is the working class. In Britain, we are the overwhelming majority of society. We are the people who make the profits for the bosses and keep society running. Collectively, together, we have the power to change it. Marx called us the grave diggers of capitalism. It was the working class, then a very small minority, not like Britain today, that led the first successful overthrow of capitalism in Russia in 1917. We know that degenerated into a brutal dictatorship as a result of its isolation and poverty. And 35 years ago, before most of you were born, it collapsed. But the capitalist class are still desperately using it to say, as Zara was told on Question Time, socialism can't work. But it's not washing. The argument isn't working. In the second richest city in the world, a self-declared socialist has just been elected as mayor, in an election with the highest turnout in 75 years. And here in Britain, when your party was first announced, not only that 800,000 people said they were wanted to join, that party was, or potential party, was polling first amongst 18 to 24-year-olds who weren't even old enough to vote when Corbyn was Labour leader. But the popularity of that anti-austerity programme has left an imprint on society. That shows the potential to build a powerful new party of the working class in Britain. Since then, as we've heard tonight, there's been some frustration at the top-down approach and the fact that your party is clearly not meeting its potential. The 50,000 who have actually joined, 6% of the 800,000, is a clear indication of that. Some, frustrated by the crisis at the top of your party, have gone and joined the Green Party, seeing the election of Zach Polansky as its leader. And there's no question, his election is another indication of the number of young people who are searching for an alternative on the left. Of course, the majority of the 800,000 have not joined either party. They are watching and they are waiting. They're frustrated, and we share their frustration, because the need for a new party is so clear. And the Greens are not that. There isn't time to deal with this in any depth tonight. But in reality, the fundamental problem with them is they accept the constraints of the capitalist system. The fact that Zach has argued that Green councils have no choice but to implement cuts, that is a very small example of the consequences of their starting point. Every time Greens have been in government, from Scotland to Germany, they have ended up attacking the working class and failing to take any significant steps against climate change. And we would add that the Greens are not a workers' party, because the organised working class, the more than 6.5 million who are organised in the trade unions, have no say whatsoever in its decision making. But we also have to say, unfortunately, your party, at least in its beginnings, is also not going to be a workers' party. Socialist Party members have joined your party. We are fighting for it to develop towards it being a democratic workers' party with a socialist programme that is open to all socialist organisations to affiliate, where public representatives, MPs, are held to account, subject to recall, and like Dave in the past, only take a worker's wage. And let's be clear, it was never going to be easy or straightforward for our class to build its own mass party, faced with the inevitable opposition and slanders of the capitalist class, their politicians and media. But whatever the complications, the struggle for a new party has begun, and the genie will not be put back into the bottle. It's clear, with a few honourable exceptions, and we're very pleased to have Ian here on the platform tonight, most of the national trade union leaders are desperate to avoid this issue. They either defend the Labour link, or they argue trade unions should stay out of politics. But the underlying reason that they do not want to get involved is because they cannot conceive of the working class taking power and beginning to build a new socialist society. It terrifies them in reality. But we have to say that unfortunately, the Your Party leadership have made it easier for the trade union leaders to avoid this issue. Because there is no room for trade union affiliation to the new party. That's going to be thought about in the next 12 months, but it's not there now. And many in your party are arguing against trade union affiliation with the idea we don't want right-wing leaders as part of our party. And the right-wing leaders are ecstatic about that. Because they don't want pressure put on them by their members to fight to build a party that represents the working class. In our view, your party should be helping to put that pressure on, joining a struggle to transform the trade unions, approaching trade union executives and saying, we want to discuss with you how our MPs can represent your interests in Parliament and how together we can start to build a party in which your members have a collective voice. But despite the undoubted mistakes in the leadership of your party, the union leaders are not going to be let off the hook. And that is because of the pressure from below, combined with our role. Dave has already talked about the decision of the Unite Conference, a conference representing more than 1 million workers who backed almost unanimously a motion to reassess their union's relationship with Labour in solidarity with the Birmingham bin workers. That issue is being posed. And as Dave has explained, we will continue to fight for the trade union movement to take steps into politics as an independent force. We'll be told, you can't do that. You've got to back Labour or you'll let reform in. Other speakers have already made this point. If the trade union leaders stick with that approach, they are rolling out the red carpet for reform. The workers' movement needs to build an independent party. The media at the moment is full of frightening reports, depressing reports, pointing to an apparently polarised and increasingly violent country. I would just like to make a very basic point that that does not tell the whole story. This is a bit of a side issue, but I was really struck when I was reading a little article tucked away about the horrific stabbing on that Peterborough train. And the article was about the heroic workers and others who stepped in to try to save people. But it was also full of research about what people actually do when things like that happen. And the answer was the vast majority of people instinctively cooperate together to try and get everybody out safely. In other words, despite the fact that we live in this dog-eat-dog society where we're told success is based on everyone being out for themselves, there is still a strongly ingrained instinct of human and, above all, class solidarity. Why is it then that the right populists of reform have been picked up as an electoral expression of anger at the establishment, led, as April said, by a man who thinks he can pose as being working class because he drinks pints? Yet he went to an exclusive public school, and he went straight from that to putting his nose in the trough of the City of London and working as a financial trader for a decade. He's only got away with it so far because our class has not put a stamp upon events. And that isn't just about elections. As April explained, we are fighting in the trade union movement for the trade unions to act, to call a national demonstration against austerity and racist division as part of preparing for strike action against this new Labour government. But it is about elections too. That 2017 general election, under Corbyn's leadership, Labour got the biggest increase in vote for any party since the Second World War in a single election. And that, as we've said, included 1 million UKIP voters. Why? Because they wanted mass council house building. They wanted nationalisation of the privatised utilities. They wanted free education, and they voted for it. Even today, where polling does not show that reform voters would switch to an as yet non-existent Your Party, it does show that 67% of reform voters think that Jeremy Corbyn stands up for working people. So that legacy is still there a bit. And imagine if, as we are fighting for, your party was to stand across the country in the local elections next year on a clear anti-austerity platform, saying, we're not going to put up council tax, we're going to build council houses, we're going to open youth clubs, we're going to introduce rent controls. How that would generate enormous enthusiasm. Of course, it would put your party on a collision course with New Labour. They would have to mobilise a mass movement like we did in the 1980s in Liverpool to take on and defeat the Labour government and demand the money that has been stolen from councils over the last 14 years. We want 60 million, 200 million in today's money from Thatcher, the Iron Lady. Starmer ain't no Iron Man. He's already given 500 million to Tory Woking Council, which went bankrupt from dodgy property deals. If councils organised a struggle against austerity, they would show they were different to all of the pro-capitalist parties, including reform, not just in words, but in deeds. It would transform the situation. The central reason that reform are ahead in the polls right now is because of a desire to protest against the capitalist parties. But of course, fundamentally, reform are swimming in the capitalist stream. They posture against the capitalist establishment while they pick up and whip up every prejudice, every wrong idea that capitalism has fostered and deeply ingrained, whether it's racism, sexism, transphobia, or other prejudices. The dominant theme at the moment is anti-migrant, and in doing that, They're only continuing the anti-migrant poison that was whipped up by the Tories and is now being whipped up by Labour. No question, the endless drumbeat of anti-migrant propaganda is giving the racists a bit of confidence. And it is essential that the workers' movement fights against racist division, defends the right to asylum, says we want to stop the bosses using workers from other countries to drive down wages, and that's why we're fighting for every worker to have the right for the job. But I would also say we have to be very confident about the potential to win overwhelming support for that programme. There is a concerted attempt to turn back the clock of history, to go back to the blatant racism that existed in the past. But it's not so easy for the racists. On Monday, after this weekend, I'm going to have a much worse Monday morning than I've had a weekend, because for my sins, I've got to go and give evidence to the police spies inquiry, which was set up after it was revealed, to nobody's surprise, that undercover police officers infiltrated the mass anti-racist movement we were leading in the early 1990s. There'd been a whole series of brutal racist murders. Today, Stephen Lawrence is the most well known, but there were a whole number. We led a movement that forced the closure of the Nazi BNP's headquarters. And we also played a central role in Tower Hamlets in East London, where the local, predominantly Bangladeshi community were facing violent Nazi thugs. And we aided the local community in fighting back. For example, we helped to initiate something called a whistle alarm system. So when the BNP turned up on an estate, everyone blew their whistles and they came out on the streets to stop the BNP. By the way, I thought that was too old-fashioned to be worth mentioning, until I read that in Chicago, the organisers against ICE are using exactly the same system today. The BNP had to retreat from Tower Hamlets, where they'd been intimidating the local population over decades. We're not there today. It's a different situation. When the far-right threatened to come to Tower Hamlets a couple of weeks ago, the police banned them before they'd even stepped foot in the borough. That was not a change in the nature of the police. That was a change in the strength, the confidence of the Asian community who said, we are not having you here, and we're going to turn out in their tens of thousands. Today, the size, the confidence of the Black and Asian communities, their involvement in the workers' movement, out at the moment, workers from every country of the world on doctors' picket lines, that makes it much harder for the racists to whip up division. That is not an argument for complacency. As Isai said, revolution and counter-revolution go hand in hand. Next year is the 100th anniversary of the 1926 general strike. That was the most powerful movement of the British working class to date. But the workers' unity in that strike was not preordained. It had to be fought for. Earlier that decade, in the working class heartlands that were the forefront of the strike, there were race riots in which black workers were killed. Today, the working class in Britain is not yet challenging for power. We don't even yet have a mass party of our own. But of course, as our movement gains strength, so will the capitalist attempts to cut across our unity with divide and rule tactics. We're not naive. They will always do everything they can to sabotage us. By the way, one example of that, a very different example, was that question time debate. Because Zara Sultana correctly said, there should be a tax on wealth in this country. And every single other political representative and commentator said, you can't do that, the rich will leave the country. By the way, what does it say about this society that commentators universally consider that is a perfectly reasonable thing for the rich to do, while someone who claims a few £100 extra in benefit should be sent to prison? It says everything about this society, but it also is true. The capitalist class do not respect democracy. When push comes to shove, they will not say to a workers' government, oh, you've passed a law that we've got to pay really high taxes. No problem. Here you are. Have the money. Like they did with Syriza in Greece, like they would have done with Jeremy Corbyn had he been elected Labour Prime Minister, they will do everything to sabotage a government that is trying to act in the interests of the working class. They will do it from the outside and they will do it from the inside. Your party takes off, then the moderate, reasonable voices who want to step back from confrontation with the bosses will be given every encouragement by the media and by the capitalist class. That struggle is underway on a citywide basis in New York at the moment. And here in Britain, that's why it's so important that the Socialist Party and others are allowed to organise in a new party. The capitalists will organise in it to sabotage it. We have to be there to do what Marx and Engels talked about in the Communist Manifesto, to be in the movement of the present, the people who to represent and take care of the future of that movement. That means being ready for the inevitable attempts to defeat any workers' government and to respond not by bowing the knee, but by removing the levers of power from the capitalist class. Starting by nationalising under democratic workers' control the banks and the major corporations that dominate our economy. Provided we had the active support of the majority of the working class, they would be powerless to stop us. We could begin to build a new socialist order, not just sharing out the wealth, but harnessing the productive forces that capitalism cannot harness in order to meet the needs of all. Now, you can't build socialism in one country, but look at the electrifying effect that one mayor calling himself a socialist has had, and imagine what the response would be around the world if a socialist government came to power and said, we're building a society in the interest of the majority and we want you to follow our lead. Now, those are the tasks that are ahead for this generation. Of course, at this point, there is still a huge gap between the depth of the crisis of capitalism, the sickness of this system, and the understanding of the working class majority of the need for socialism. And that means it's inevitable that our class is going to have to learn through bitter experience, including defeats. We're in a period of flux. Things are changing very rapidly. You can't predict when the next general election is going to be, never mind the outcome. But given Reform's current lead in the polls, there is a fear that Farage could end up in number 10. And that adds urgency to the workers' movement building an independent political voice. Of course, Reform is not the preferred choice of the capitalist class. They want someone more reliable for their interests, and they'll try and sabotage Reform winning. They're also working to tame them, and when Farage speaks to the bond markets and says, don't worry, he makes it absolutely clear he really is the establishment's anti-establishment politician. No doubt, the British capitalist class take comfort from looking abroad, from Italy, where the Italian capitalists didn't want Meloni, but she's doing their bidding very nicely. But we have to take confidence from that too, because Italy has a repressive, anti-working class, brutal government. But it's not correct, as some do, to call it fascism. Fascism was a mass movement that destroyed the organisations of the working class. The Italian working class hasn't been destroyed. They're leading the world. They were the first to organise general strike action in defence of Gaza, and Meloni was powerless in the We must not underestimate the power of our class, as we saw in South Korea, when an attempted coup was rapidly defeated by a general strike. That doesn't mean we're going to be able to stop some future defeats. They're inevitable. But we can say the best way to minimise the number of defeats and to maximise the victories is to build the Socialist Party here and the CWI worldwide. And I would say to you, if you're not a member, join us. Get stuck in to arguing and campaigning for socialism. and also to studying the ideas of Marxism. And by studying, I don't mean what some of you will be doing in university lecture halls. We're a workers' party. We welcome people from all backgrounds, provided they put themselves on the standpoint of the working class. But our party is dominated by working class people, and our study is fundamentally the lessons of working class people trying to change the world in the past, so we can make sure that we succeed in the future. As Helen said, this is the first socialism event since we lost Peter Taff. He was the General Secretary of our party when we led mass struggles in Liverpool and the poll tax and defeated Thatcher. He was a workers' leader in every sense. He studied Marxism deeply, but always in order to answer the question, what needs to be done? Some of the younger members here won't have ever met him. And we're not interested, Peter was definitely not interested in idolising individuals, no matter how great their role. But nonetheless, we're producing this book, and we will produce more books of Peter's writings because they are invaluable for the lessons, for the struggles that are coming ahead, which will be greater than anything his generation took part in. Capitalism is rotten to the core. Its parties and institutions are in deep crisis. We are going to have opportunities to put it out of its misery. We have to fight to build a party that can ensure our class takes those opportunities. I appeal to you to join us.
Today, the Socialist Party is a growing force, and I can't add much more to Hannah's appeal for you to join if you're not already a member, other than to say parts of our recruitment team will be down at the front of the stage on your left-hand side of the stage after the end of the rally if you would like to find out, if you would like to join or find out more about what it would mean for you. This rally has discussed the increasing crisis facing an ailing capitalist system, but also that we know it isn't enough to be angry or just to be organised. We need to be organised on a clear socialist programme which can mobilise the working class to change society. Just a few last-minute announcements. If you're a student in the audience, we'll also be having a Socialist Students' meeting at 8 p.m. in the foyer area outside of this hall. For everyone else in the room, we have arranged a bar, again, outside of this room, outside of the hall, which will be open for us, so you should all stick around. But we also have to thank the many people who have helped make this weekend a success. That includes anyone who has helped ring round, tell people about the event, sell tickets, the regional organisers, the registration team, the speakers, chairs, stewards, and also everyone who has asked a question in a session, made a contribution. All of that is vitally important to a weekend of discussion, which will leave us all better prepared for the struggles that we're going back to in our areas tomorrow. We also want to thank the venue staff who have helped us run a very smooth event. We should give them a round of applause. I'd also ask you to give a special thanks to the Socialism organising team of Theo, Oscar, Adam G and Adam PD, so they should get a round of applause. Just keep in your seats for one more minute. We've got two final tasks. The first is that we'd like to send a solidarity picture to the striking Birmingham bin workers, and not all of you, but some of you will have posters on your chairs. If you could at least stand up, I suppose, but don't move. We'd like to take a picture very quickly. And the the very final task is us to end this rally in a way that is in the tradition of the workers and socialist movement, which is to sing the Internationale. The words are on a piece of paper which was handed out on the way in, and I have been told, although it wasn't confirmed, that Dave Nellis is going to lead us in the singing.
Normally takes a point to get me to sing. Pitch the tune. Arise, ye starlings, from your slumbers. Arise, ye criminals.